My name is Marcia Birch. I'm 43 years old, and I used to believe if I carried enough of the load, my family would eventually notice I was holding the whole damn house up. I was wrong. It happened on a Sunday that was supposed to be harmless, one of those family brunch gatherings my mother insisted on hosting so she could post photos afterward and caption them with something like, "Blessed beyond measure." She loved the word blessed, the way some people loved apology. Used it often, meant it rarely. The table was set like a magazine spread. Beige linen runner, fake eucalyptus, mismatched plates that somehow screamed rustic charm while costing more than my first car. The air smelled like cinnamon rolls and control. I arrived early, like I always did. Not because I enjoyed it, because being early meant I could fix things before anyone noticed they were broken. The front door was unlocked, as usual. My mother believed locked doors were for people with something to hide. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been my life. "Marcia," she called from the kitchen, voice bright. "You're here." Not hi, not how are you, just confirmation, like I was a delivery she'd been tracking. I stepped in, balancing a pastry box from the bakery across town, and a bag of fresh coffee beans I knew she liked but never bought for herself. Her kitchen looked perfect, which meant it was a trap. Everything in my mother's house was staged the way her love was staged, pretty from the front, sharp if you touched it wrong. "You didn't have to bring anything," she said, reaching for the pastry box. I didn't answer, because we both knew that was a lie. If I came empty-handed, I'd be the topic of conversation before the eggs were even served. My father sat at the table, already in his chair, like he'd been placed there earlier and forgotten. He was staring at the sports section with the blank focus of a man who learned long ago that silence was safer than taking sides. My brother Travis wasn't there yet. Neither was my sister, Alyssa, or her husband. And that was exactly why my mother wanted me early. She liked having an audience when she warmed up. I set the coffee beans on the counter and pulled out my phone. One new notification. Auto pay scheduled, home insurance, due in 2 days. I stared at it, thumb hovering, and felt something in my chest tighten. Not fear, not sadness. Expectation. Because I already knew what was coming. I just didn't know which version of it today would be. My mother watched me over her shoulder as she whisked eggs. "You're quiet." "I'm tired," I said. She smiled like she'd caught me lying. "You're always tired." I wanted to say, that's what happens when you live like the family's emergency fund, but I swallowed it like I swallowed everything else. The doorbell rang at exactly 10:15. Travis arrived first, late on purpose, like punctuality was beneath him. He strolled in with that confident slouch of someone who always landed on his feet because someone else built the floor. "Hey," he said, kissing my mother's cheek. "Smells good." He didn't look at me until he'd already passed me, and even then it was a glance, not a greeting. Travis had always been my mother's favorite in the quiet way she'd never admit out loud. Alyssa got praise. Travis got forgiveness. Then Alyssa arrived, glowing in a cream sweater and expensive boots. Her husband followed with a bouquet that was definitely bought 5 minutes earlier from a grocery store stand. My mother acted like it was romantic anyway. Everyone settled into their roles without being told. My father sat and nodded. My mother hosted and smiled. Travis joked and took seconds. Alyssa performed stability. And me? I filled glasses, refilled coffee, smiled at the right moments. The table looked full, but I felt like a chair they'd dragged in last minute, the kind with a wobble nobody wanted to acknowledge. Halfway through brunch, my mother clinked her spoon against a mug. That sound, small, bright, hit my nerves like a warning bell. "I just want to say something," she announced. Travis leaned back, already amused. Alyssa's husband lifted his phone slightly, like he expected something shareable. My mother's eyes landed on me. Not warmly, not fondly. Calculated. "I've been thinking," she began, "that it's time we all stop enabling certain patterns." My stomach turned once, slow. Travis snorted. "Oh boy." Alyssa raised her eyebrows as if this was going to be entertaining, not destructive. My mother continued, voice sweet as frosting. Some people in this family have gotten comfortable relying on others." My father cleared his throat. It was a weak sound, the kind of warning that never stopped anything. My mother ignored him. "And I think it's time we stop pretending that's okay." My heart didn't race. That was the strangest part. It was like my body had already accepted the blow before it landed. She tilted her head, still looking directly at me. "Marcia, honey, you need to grow up." The words sat on the table between the plates like something rotten. For a second, nobody moved. Even the clock on the wall sounded too loud, ticking like it was counting down to something. Travis exhaled a laugh, quick, sharp. Finally. Alyssa didn't laugh, but she didn't defend me either. She just watched me the way people watch a car accident, horrified, but unwilling to look away. My father stared down at his plate like the eggs could save him. My mother leaned forward slightly. We've all noticed you've been drifting, always talking about being stressed, always acting like you're doing so much for everyone. She paused, letting the implication spread. As if we owe you something. I looked at her, really looked. Her lipstick was perfect. Her smile was small. Her eyes were steady. This wasn't a slip, this was a decision. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because the truth was too big for that table. Because if I started listing the things I'd paid for, quietly, consistently, the entire image they'd built of themselves would collapse. And I realized, in that moment, that they didn't fear my anger. They feared my proof. Travis leaned in, elbows on the table. You know, it's kind of embarrassing, he said, like he was sharing a joke. A grown woman still needing the family to keep her afloat. My hands went cold around my coffee mug. Alyssa's husband shifted uncomfortably, but he still didn't speak. My mother nodded, pleased Travis had joined in. Exactly. You're smart, Marcia. Capable. You should be standing on your own. The room blurred at the edges, not from tears, from disbelief. Because I was standing on my own. I was standing on my own while carrying them. I paid the insurance on this house. The phone plan Travis forgot to switch. The emergency loan Alyssa needed last year that never got mentioned again. The property taxes my father pretended were handled. The medical bill from my mother's minor surgery she cried about until I said, I'll take care of it. And now she was telling me to stop relying on them? I could have laughed. I almost did. But something else happened instead. A calm slid over me like a coat. Not numbness. Clarity. I set my mug down gently, the ceramic clicking once against the wood. I wiped my mouth with my napkin, folding it neatly the way I'd learned to do when I didn't want anyone to see my hands shake. My mother watched me, smugness flickering behind her eyes. She expected tears, or an argument, or some dramatic plea that would reinforce the story she was telling. I gave her none of it. I stood. Chairs creaked, forks paused again. Travis blinked like he didn't understand what I was doing. Alyssa's mouth parted slightly, as if she wanted to stop me, but didn't know what words to use that wouldn't make her a target too. My father finally looked up. His eyes met mine for half a second. And in that half second, I saw it. He knew. He'd always known. He just never thought I'd stop. I reached for my coat, draped over the back of my chair. My mother's voice sharpened. Where do you think you're going? I slid my arms into the sleeves slowly. The fabric felt heavier than it should have, like it carried every unpaid debt and swallowed insult stitched into the lining. I turned back to the table. No drama, I said softly. No speeches. Travis scoffed. Oh, come on, don't be dramatic. That almost made me smile because it proved how little he understood. To him, drama was noise. To me, drama was 20 years of quiet sacrifice. I looked at my mother one last time. You're right, I said. Her eyes lit up. Vindication. Like she'd won. I do need to grow up. The smile on her face froze. Because something about my tone didn't match her fantasy. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my keys, and wrapped my fingers around them like they were the only real thing in the room. Thanks for brunch, I said. Then I walked out. Behind me, the silence didn't chase. It didn't call my name. Nobody followed. And that told me everything. Outside, the air was cold enough to sting. I breathed in, and it felt like the first honest breath I'd taken in years. My phone buzzed in my hand. Another notification. Auto pay scheduled. Home insurance. Due in 2 days. I stared at it, standing alone in the driveway. My mother's perfect house behind me like a stage set. And for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt choice. I didn't drive away right away. I sat in my car at the curb, engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel, like I needed to remind myself how gravity worked. The house behind me looked exactly the same as it always had. Trim hedges, white shutters, a wreath still hanging even though the season had passed. Nothing about it reflected what had just happened inside. That was always the problem with my family. The damage never showed from the outside. My phone buzzed again. Same notification, same reminder. Auto pay scheduled. Home insurance due in 2 days. I laughed once, not loudly, just a short breath that escaped before I could stop it. Relying on them. The engine turned over smoothly when I started the car, like it always did. I drove home on autopilot, stopping at red lights, signaling turns, my body handling logistics, while my mind finally caught up with the truth it had been avoiding for years. When I got to my condo, the quiet felt different. Not lonely, neutral, honest. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my bag by the door, and stood there for a moment listening to nothing. No television murmuring in another room, no passive-aggressive sighs, no expectations vibrating in the walls. Just me. I poured a glass of water and drank it slowly, like my body needed proof that basic needs could be met without anyone else's permission. Then I opened my laptop. The spreadsheet was already there, minimized, but waiting. I hadn't opened it in weeks, not because it didn't matter, but because I'd memorized it. Every line item lived in my head whether I wanted it to or not. I maximized the window. Rows of numbers filled the screen. Dates, account names, notes I'd typed to myself years ago, like temporary and one-time help, and don't mention this again. I scrolled. Home insurance, utilities, cell phone family plan, medical reimbursement, car repair loan, property tax assistance. The total sat at the bottom in bold, a number I'd stopped reacting to a long time ago, because reacting had never changed anything. I hovered my cursor over the first item. Home insurance, auto pay enabled. 2 days. That was all the warning the system gave before doing what I'd told it to do years ago. I clicked. The confirmation window popped up. Are you sure you want to cancel this payment? Yes. I didn't hesitate. I didn't negotiate with myself. I didn't feel the old reflex to justify it. I clicked confirm. The line item grayed out. Something in my chest loosened, not dramatically, just enough to notice. Next was the utilities. Water first, then gas, then electricity. Each account had my name on it, my email attached, my card stored. I'd set them up temporarily during a rough patch that somehow never ended. Cancel, cancel, cancel. No alarms went off, no sirens, no dramatic warning that I was doing something irreversible. Just quiet confirmations sliding into my inbox. I checked my phone out of habit. 3 missed calls. Travis. Of course. I didn't listen to the voicemails. I didn't need to. I knew the tone already. Confusion turning to irritation, turning to anger, the moment he realized something had changed without his consent. I moved on to the phone plan. 5 lines. Mine plus 4 others. My name at the top. My card at the bottom. I'd kept them on because it was easier. Because separating it felt like conflict. Because I didn't want to be accused of being petty. Funny how protecting the peace always seemed to cost me the most. I removed each line one by one, leaving mine intact. Submit. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling for a moment, breathing through the strange mix of relief and grief settling into my body. This wasn't revenge. It was correction. The knock came 2 days later. Not a knock, really. More like 3 hesitant taps, unevenly spaced, as if whoever was on the other side wasn't sure they deserved to be heard. I already knew who it was. I opened the door and found my mother standing there, clutching her purse with both hands like it was a shield. Her cardigan hung looser than I remembered. Her eyes were rimmed red, makeup smudged in a way that told me she'd tried to fix it and failed. For the first time in my life, she didn't speak immediately. She just looked at me, uncertain. It was almost unrecognizable. I stepped aside just enough to let her in. She moved slowly, like the floor might reject her, then sat on the edge of my couch without being asked. She didn't take her coat off. 10 minutes passed mostly in silence. Finally, she asked, "Why are you doing this?" Not "I'm sorry," not "I didn't mean it," not even "we need help." Just why? I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, and studied her face. I wondered if she truly didn't know, or if she'd just never allowed herself to look. "I'm not doing anything," I said calmly. "I stopped doing things." She nodded slowly, like she was filing that away under unacceptable but noted. She left without another word. That night, my phone rang again. This time it was Travis. I let it ring twice before answering. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he snapped. "The internet's out at the house, and Mom's freaking out about the insurance." I smiled slightly, surprised by how little it took. "I'm not your provider, Travis." A sharp inhale on the other end. "So this is it? You finally think you're better than us?" "No," I said evenly. "You've always thought that. I just stopped apologizing for it." He launched into a tirade. How I'd changed. How money had ruined me. How I forgot where I came from. I let him talk because it all sounded rehearsed. When he finally paused for breath, I said, "I paid for your car repair last year. You said you'd pay me back." Silence. "I was going through stuff," he muttered. "So was I said. Then I hung up. The next call never came. Later that night, I opened the spreadsheet one last time. Scrolled to the bottom. Highlighted every active payment. Then I closed the file. Not minimized. Closed. I shut the laptop and sat in the quiet, hands folded in my lap, heart steady. For the first time in years, there was nothing pending, nothing due, nothing owed. And I realized something then, sitting alone in my living room with the lights low and the city humming outside my windows. They weren't angry because I'd abandoned them. They were angry because I'd stopped saving them. And once I understood that, I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of the part where they tried to take back control. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday. Thick, cream-colored. Official in the way that makes your stomach tighten before your brain catches up. Certified mail. My full name typed neatly across the front, as if courtesy could soften the intent. I didn't open it right away. I set it on the kitchen counter next to my coffee mug and watched the steam curl upward, thinning as it rose. For a strange moment, I felt almost calm. Not because I didn't know what it was, but because I'd known this step was coming long before they did. When you stop being useful to people who mistake access for entitlement, they don't ask questions. They escalate. I slid a finger under the seal and pulled the papers free. Petition for reversal of property transfer. Filed by my mother. My eyes scanned the words automatically. Mental duress, lack of informed consent, undue influence. Phrases designed to paint her as confused and me as manipulative. A story that required me to be reckless, emotional, impulsive. I almost admired the consistency. I sat down at the table and read it twice, slowly, like I was proofreading something written by a stranger who thought she knew me. She was trying to take the lake house back, the cabin they'd always called the family retreat, the one I paid to maintain, the one I wasn't invited to anymore once my usefulness became too visible. I set the papers down carefully and took a sip of coffee that had already gone cold. This wasn't about property. It was about control. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even text Travis or Alyssa. I already knew how that would go. Panic dressed as righteousness, anger disguised as concern. Instead, I stood up and walked into my office. There was a slim black binder on the bottom shelf of the bookcase, untouched for 3 years. The label was simple. Lake property. I pulled it out and flipped to the tab I already knew by heart. There it was, the clause. I remembered the day I'd insisted on it. My mother had laughed like I was being dramatic. My father had waved it off. Your family, he'd said. We don't need all that. But I did, because somewhere deep down, I'd known gratitude had an expiration date. The reversion clause was clean, precise, ruthlessly boring in the way only good legal language can be. If the property was sold, if ownership was challenged, if I was excluded from decisions regarding it, it reverted back to me, automatically. No court battle, no negotiation, no room for emotion. I paid extra to make it airtight. That was the day I stopped being their benefactor and became their contingency plan. I called my lawyer that afternoon. He didn't sound surprised. She filed already? He asked, flipping through the scanned documents I'd sent him. Yes. A pause, then a low chuckle. You were smart to include this, he said. She has no idea what she's walked into. Neither did they. The meeting happened 3 days later. I chose the diner on 5th, the one we used to go to after church when I was still trying to earn approval, like it was something you could collect if you tried hard enough. They were already there when I arrived. My mother sat stiffly in the booth, hands folded tight. My father stared at the tabletop. Travis leaned back with his arms crossed, jaw clenched. Alyssa sat beside him, eyes darting between everyone like she was trying to calculate her safest exit. No one ordered food. No one smiled. I slid into the seat across from them and placed the folder on the table. No theatrics. No greeting. Just paper. They flipped through it slowly. Page after page. Numbers. Dates. Copies of checks. Receipts. Highlighted totals. Travis muttered, "You paid that much?" My father's hands shook slightly as he turned another page. Finally, my mother spoke. Why now? I met her gaze evenly, because I realized I was the only one holding this family together. Silence. And instead of being grateful, I continued, you treated me like a burden. Her mouth opened, closed. No rebuttal came. My father looked up then, eyes glassy. For once, I didn't reach across the table to comfort him. Travis slammed the folder shut. This is insane. You're blowing everything up over money. No, I said quietly. I'm blowing it up over entitlement. I slid my business card across the table and wrote a number on the back. That's my lawyer's direct line. If you want to contest the clause, that's your right. But understand something first. I stood. You won't be fighting me. You'll be fighting evidence. I left them sitting there, surrounded by paper and truth and the dawning realization that the version of me who stayed silent was gone. Outside, the air was sharp and clean. I breathed it in like permission. This wasn't revenge. It was the cost of finally being seen. I didn't look back when I walked out of the diner. I didn't need to. I could already picture them sitting there, my mother rigid with shock, my father staring at numbers he'd never wanted to acknowledge, Travis simmering with the kind of anger that comes when control slips through your fingers, Alyssa silent and calculating which version of the story she'd repeat later. For once, it wasn't my job to manage their reactions. The winter air hit my face hard, sharp enough to sting, and I welcomed it. It felt real, honest, like consequences. I drove home without music, without distraction. The city lights blurred past my windshield, and for the first time in years, my mind wasn't racing ahead to the next crisis, the next bill, the next emotional fire I'd have to put out. There was nothing pending, nothing waiting for me to fix. That night, I didn't pour a drink, I didn't cry, I didn't pace the apartment replaying conversations and wondering what I should have said differently. I sat on the couch, legs tucked beneath me, staring at the lamp glowing softly in the corner of the room. The quiet didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. For years, I'd been the scaffolding holding up a rotting structure, telling myself that if I just braced harder, if I absorbed a little more weight, the walls wouldn't collapse. But scaffolding isn't meant to last forever. It's meant to come down once the building is sound. And my family was never sound. They were cracked beams hidden under fresh paint, and I was done pretending otherwise. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. The sky outside my window was washed in that bluish-gray light that makes everything feel colder than it is. I brewed coffee, sat at my desk, and opened my laptop. For the first time in years, there was no spreadsheet waiting for me. No balance sheet of guilt, no running tally of favors, no proof I needed to justify my existence. Instead, I opened a blank document. At the top of the page, I typed, "What I owe myself." The cursor blinked. Steady, patient. The first line came easily. Peace of mind. The second followed just as quickly. The freedom to choose who deserves my time. The third took longer. My fingers hovered over the keys before the words finally landed. Permission to stop apologizing for surviving on my own terms. Once I started, I couldn't stop. I wrote promises instead of numbers, boundaries instead of explanations, things I'd postponed for years because someone else always needed more from me. By noon, the page was full. I printed it out and pinned it to the corkboard above my desk, the same board that used to be crowded with overdue reminders and quiet obligations. It felt like signing a new contract, one where the only signature that mattered was mine. A week passed. No calls, no surprise visits, no new legal threats. The silence stretched, but it didn't suffocate me. It gave me room. I started taking long walks in the evenings, noticing parts of my neighborhood I'd ignored for years. The bakery on the corner that smelled like cinnamon. The small park where kids carved their names into wooden benches. It felt like waking up in a city I'd always lived in but never really seen. Then, one afternoon, as I sat on a bench near the river, my phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it. Almost. "Hello?" I said. "Marcia?" The voice was soft, hesitant. "It's Anna, your cousin." We hadn't spoken in years, not since she moved across the country and quietly distanced herself from the family orbit. "I heard what happened," she continued carefully. "About the house, about everything." I braced myself without meaning to. "I just wanted to say I'm proud of you." The words landed differently than I expected. No conditions, no advice, no guilt tucked between syllables. Just pride. "Thank you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. When the call ended, I sat there watching the water ripple beneath the bridge, feeling something unfamiliar settle into my chest. Hope. Not the fragile kind that depends on someone else changing. The steady kind. The kind that grows quietly, rooted deep, impossible to shake. Because the truth was, I hadn't walked away empty-handed. I hadn't lost my family. I'd lost access to people who only loved me when I was useful. And in exchange, I gained myself. That night, back in my condo, the lamp glowed softly in the corner again. The quiet wrapped around me, not as absence, but as space. Space to breathe, space to choose, space to finally live without asking permission. Maybe one day they'd call, maybe they wouldn't. But for the first time in my life, the outcome didn't define me. I did.